Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hidden growth opportunities throughout online business. We're your host. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brandon, and thanks for joining us for our latest episode.
Today we'll be speaking with Chelsea Cohen, Amazon seller and co-founder of Overstock. Chelsea is a wealth of knowledge for all things inventory management. She digs deep on the tired and true rules to grow your Amazon business through efficient stock management. And she also explains the recent Amazon fees that have upended how sellers store stock at Amazon's warehouses. Together, we get into how to avoid stocking out and overstocking and why great inventory management can lead to the most lucrative exit possible. You won't want to miss out on this go-to guide for all things inventory.
That's right, but we don't want to give away too much just yet, so let's dig into the interview and see what Chelsea has to share, and then at the end of the episode, we'll go over some common questions online business owners face and what you can learn from them. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. We are really excited to have today's guest on with us, Chelsea Cohen. Chelsea, thanks so much for coming on and joining us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's kick things off. Can you introduce us to yourself and where you are in the world right now?
Yeah, my name is Chelsea Cohen. I am an Amazon seller as well as the co-founder of Overstock, and I am coming from Austin, Texas.
Awesome, Austin. That's so cool. So we were talking a little bit about Overstock offline, obviously commenting that it is such a great name and so catchy. So good one figuring that one out there. For those of us, not everyone knows about, say, Overstock and how you got where you are today. So for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and what it looks like currently.
Yeah. So I started selling on Amazon, and that's how everything started. It was in 2014. My husband and I were really looking for some sort of business opportunity. We looked into car washes and then realized we did not have the money to buy a car wash. They're expensive. So we were like, kind of trying to find something. We ended up in network marketing thing and started talking to friends of ours to try to get them to, sign up for our deal or whatever it was. We really weren't happy with what we were doing, so we kind of kept our ears perked, and a lot of people kept repeating the same thing. They said, that sounds great. I'm actually putting my time and money into learning how to sell on Amazon. I'm going to learn from this course at the time. It was called Amazing Selling Machine. It's still around. And that was the first time I'd ever heard that you could sell on Amazon. So I started talking to some friends of mine. One of my friends was making $60,000 a month selling on Amazon. And I thought, that's a lot of money. And she had no previous knowledge of it. She said, yeah, I did this course. It taught me how to do it. And so we basically said, we need to take this course, signed up for the course, got our first product, made our sales. And that was really the start of it. And that's how we got into selling on Amazon. And the thing that I recognized with Amazon, I knew that even if you don't want to, sell physical products on Amazon or, build a brand, it's a jumping off point to a lot of different things. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, we still have our Amazon business, but we're able to then find other opportunities within the space to add value. And Overstock came about from really recognizing that we ourselves have problems with inventory, and there was no inventory tool out there that really was doing what we felt it should be doing.
That's awesome. I wanted to quickly ask, maybe get more clarity. You said you started an FBA, but it sounds like you went on to more of the Amazon ecosystem. But can you paint me a picture of that? Like, are you still kind of active in the space, or, how did FBA kind of launch you with enough experience to go on and take on those other businesses?
So yeah, I am still a seller, and FBA has been, really great, really just the ability to create a business without having to have all that overhead. To me, that was a huge light bulb moment. So, we have been selling since 2014, and started working with other entrepreneurs who, we had friends who were then starting to sell, and they would ask us questions, and we would be continually answering the same questions over and over again. So we actually built out a little website that had free videos just so that we didn't have to answer the same questions over again, and found ourselves gradually just becoming kind of mentors in the space. And I found that I really liked to help other people. Like, that was really where my passion was, and my husband as well. Our passions were to be able to help other people along this journey. I can do so much with my business, but if I can help other people to succeed, then I know that there's a greater impact that is made, in people's families, in what they do in terms of, where they put their money, donations, and that type of thing. And so really, next couple of businesses kind of came about originally from just having made those connections and seeing what help people needed. So my next venture that I kind of fell into was copywriting. I actually have a copywriting agency called Badass Business Builders. And I started basically speaking on stage about and on podcasts about copywriting and how to write for Amazon. And that was kind of the next thing that I started doing. It was just really, it's all about kind of opening yourself up to opportunities, seeing where there's maybe a gap where people are kind of missing out on something or they need more help on something. So that was the agency. And then that was kind of the same way that I fell into inventory problems and needing to find a solution for those for my own business. Started asking in the masterminds, what are you using? What tools are working? And they basically all said, nothing works. We've really gone back to spreadsheets, and let me know if you find anything. So I decided, this is also an opportunity and I needed to do something about this. And that was how SoStock came about, was just seeing that there was nothing better than spreadsheets in a space with 6, 7, and 8-figure sellers.
Yeah, that's really amazing to hear that you ultimately building a community and offering free value to friends and family and people within your network. And then everyone's coming to you for answers. And then lo and behold, you find this amazing opportunity with SoStocked and being able to help people with their e-commerce businesses and their inventory management. So that's really crazy to hear this story and hear, how everything got started from the beginning. So for our listeners who might not be familiar with what SoStocked is, can you bring us up to speed on what it does, or maybe what the service does for your clients and what your role is with the company?
Sure. SoStocked is an inventory management software, and it helps you to create demand forecast and what we call forecast modeling. So you'd have tools that would be able to take past data and say, spit out a number and say, this is what you should order based on a couple of, settings that you've made. But was this other piece that was missing? It was, too cookie cutter. Sometimes it would work for some of my products. Sometimes it wouldn't work for other products. I didn't understand the numbers. I have a little bit of a, bookkeeping and accounting and numbers background. So everything really needed to make sense, and it didn't. And not understanding the numbers and not being able to customize things was really what started me on the journey to SoStocked, where the difference between what we're doing is we recognize that inventory management is both science and art. And there was a very scientific approach in taking your past data and spitting out a number based on a fancy algorithm that was going to be kept secret from you. We took a different approach in saying, what is working about the spreadsheets? What's not working about the spreadsheets? Let's take everything that's working about the spreadsheets, cut out everything that's not, give you the ability to analyze your data, to manipulate your data, and also add your future plans, because inventory is, the science part of it is the past data, and the art of it is the future plans and future, predictions is that art that you need to be able to add, and that missing piece, which is why we call it forecast modeling rather than just mere, algorithmic forecasting.
Okay. Now, on the subject of gathering this data from your clients and having them enter this, what is most important from their P&Ls or their spreadsheets, what information is most important, I guess you could say, that for your service to really give that forecast modeling a realistic term for them to kind of reach that goal, or at least set their sights on that goal for the future?
Yeah, so it's pulling the data from Amazon, from the Amazon API directly. First and most important, if you want to have things happening as much real time as possible, the data needs to be pulled, because if, say, you have a spike that occurs or you have a stock out, those types of things if they're not accounted for and you're not factoring those things out on a regular basis, you could be, say, running out of stock, or you could be placing a large order without really knowing. So the first part is, having the data from Amazon and having it refreshed, say, once or twice a day. But then the other side of it is, what are your plans for the business? We really believe that you understand more about your business than an algorithm does. And so a big thing that we discovered in talking about, I have my own business, but it really is important to talk to other sellers. And so the first, say, year and a half, 2 years of having the software live and being in a beta state, I talked to hundreds of sellers and I onboarded them into the software and I answered their questions and I asked about what their problems were, talking to PPC agencies, talking to brand managers, and the common denominator between what one of the biggest issues was is that the marketing team was not communicating with the inventory team. And so, if there was one thing that you had to shift, it's getting data from the marketing team to the inventory team and getting data from the inventory team to the marketing team so that they're both working together. And we coined a phrase, which is inventory-minded marketing. And so that was really the biggest takeaway for us, and something that we're trying to teach everyone who we talk to is that you need to have a system for connecting up these two teams to be able to truly work together so that you can avoid things like stockouts.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear that perspective and, the way you talk about it, the art and science of it. It's so funny because we've had people on this podcast and it seems like there's always split opinions. We've had a couple, I would say rogue people who will say, I love inventory management. It is like a video game. Instead of watching Netflix, I get on and I look at my inventory. And then I think everyone else, I'm assuming if they're quiet, that means it's probably not their favorite part of running their Amazon FBA business. I feel like, a lot of people, they get into FBA and they're excited that Amazon is there to handle the logistics, only to find out that inventory management falls in their hands and they realize it's a challenge. So, this might seem like an obvious question, but I was wondering, why do you think inventory management is so difficult for people to get right?
Yeah, it is a very complex machine. And there's a lot going on, especially when Amazon's got, the new restrictions that they've got, and really is forcing a lot of businesses to also adopt an outside, third-party warehouse. I really think that, when people start out, the biggest challenge is, they're not familiar with things and there's so many things going on and they're usually running their business by themselves. So they have two big things that are standing in their way. One is that they're doing so many things that inventory management is sometimes the last thing on their list of things to do. And with such long lead times like a lot of these businesses have, you can't wait too long. Otherwise, you turn around and you should have ordered 2 weeks ago. So it's just really, so many things that you have to do. And then the other side is the cash flow side and not having enough cash to purchase enough inventory to handle the growth, because the money that you put down, you're not going to see that for, say, 3-4 months.
Yeah, it seems to be, when it's not done right, it can be a vicious cycle. And we'll get into that a little bit more. I did want to follow up on something that you just mentioned. You were talking about Amazon's new inventory changes. I was wondering if you could paint a picture of that, for people who aren't familiar, and what kind of changes you've already seen that have to sellers across the FBA space.
Yeah, so Amazon has been doing a lot in terms of changing up their inventory policies. It's actually very interesting. It's not since until COVID that inventory management became a very interesting subject, and being, having first started in mid 2018 to start working on this, it's been very, interesting to see, trying to bang down the door to let people know that inventory is important. And then all of a sudden, everyone wants to talk about it because Amazon's changes are what actually caused that to happen. It's actually caused some restrictions. And the most recent restriction is that you have a restriction on the amount of inventory that you can send into Amazon's FBA warehouses. One of the reasons that they're doing this is because they're just overrun. They have way too much inventory and they're trying to control the amount of inventory that they're holding, because they really first intended to be a distribution center and they're becoming a storage facility, meaning that people are parking stale inventory. So they are putting a restriction catalog wide. So they're saying, here's the total number of units. You can spend those units however you want. You can put all of your best sellers in, or you can clog up all that space with a bunch of products that are not moving. And you've got sellers who have spent the last, say, 3, 4, 5, 6 years clogging up and not having to worry about those excess units. And now those units are keeping them from sending in their best sellers. And so there can be created a stock out cycle. And when you stock out of a product, it actually will decrease your total sales, which Amazon uses to give you more storage. So your stock out then causes you to have less storage space available the next time around. So it becomes a real juggling act and a real issue. And there's a lot of shifts and kind of fancy footwork that needs to go into reorganizing the way that people think about inventory so that they can actually have a good relationship with Amazon regarding their inventory, get those inventory limits up. And most people really will have to be getting an extra outside warehouse.
Yeah, it's a very important mention that you said, Chelsea. It's something that we do talk to a lot of sellers about too. They end up using a 3PL or a third-party logistics company to store a lot of items, but often we hear them usually saying they get items directly shipped from their manufacturers or suppliers in China, and then they go directly to Amazon FBA. And it's really awesome to hear you bring that up. And maybe some of their not so great selling products are now holding up storage area that could be going towards their best sellers. So that kind of led me into a thought I wanted to ask you. So I'm curious, what are like some of the typical ranges of clients that you have at SoStock? Is it mostly sellers that are in the 6-figure or 7-figure range, or do you have kind of a broad mix of smaller sellers and bigger sellers as well?
Yeah, we do have some smaller sellers, but mostly it's, 6, 7 and low 8-figure sellers. We have some integrations that we're working on that will allow us to work with some of the larger 8-figure sellers, and as far as kind of the lower end in terms of the sellers that are just growing their company, those sellers will probably grow into SoStocked simply because it's such a complex tool, and it's something that as a seller gets to know their business more and gets to have a better grasp on their business, they're going to need a tool like that. But say you have, 1 or 2 SKUs, maybe 3 SKUs, that's something that you could use kind of one of these more introductory tools, like something that comes with a software suite such as Managed by Stats.
Okay. Now, what would you say are some of the more unique challenges for, let's say, the mid-sized FBA businesses, or maybe the ones that are more qualified to come and use your service? What do you see are maybe some of the challenges that they're facing now when it comes to inventory management?
So now the biggest challenge now is the restock limits. And it really is having to put systems in place. A lot of these guys, they have some sort of systems, but they're not lockstep with their marketing team. You have a lot of people who started businesses, they're marketers first. So they are finally growing up into the inventory and the cash flow side of business. So that's been, I think, a challenge, is putting what systems to put in place. And really that the systems that used to work now don't work. There's completely different systems. And because we have what the restock limits are referred to as storage type limits, meaning that, you have, say, all of your standard size products all share the same number. You no longer have where each product has its own limit. They all share the same. So you have to have your marketers actually start being responsible for those slower sellers. And that it used to be that they were responsible for driving as much revenue profitably as possible. And that really is using the 80-20 rule. 80% of that comes from 20% of the products. So the other 80% of the products that are really not moving as much, they're taking their focus off of them. And they've been used to doing that for years. So now they actually have to market across the entire catalog, and they have to be responsible for moving the inventory out of Amazon if it's not successful.
Yeah, really good mention. That's something I'm sure a lot of sellers kind of just put to the wayside, and they don't really think about like which products they should be promoting more over maybe some of the best sellers that are doing fine just on their own. And that way you're not having stale inventory, as you mentioned, taking up all that storage space. Now, when it comes to the consequences of, say, an Amazon FBA seller, outside of maybe even outstocking, but what are some of the typical consequences that these sellers are facing when it comes to inventory management going wrong?
Overstocking, understocking, and sending in inventory too late, those are basic problems. There's a lot of ways that you can arrive at that, but those are all the basic problems. A lot of that has to do with bad data or poor planning. It's just not having processes in place. And the consequences really, say, overstocking something are the same things that could result in stocking out at this point. That used to not be the case, but now with the storage type limits, you overstock on a product that's taking up the room of your best sellers, and your best sellers maybe are having a harder time getting in there. That could create a stock out, and then that stock out means that you're selling less, and Amazon's algorithm is not smart enough to recognize that you have stocked out of a product, and that they should actually afford you the benefit of the doubt that if you have that product, you would actually be able to sell it. And so they actually shrink your limits as opposed to kind of holding that, putting a placeholder there for you. So that's one big fault of the Amazon inventory algorithm. And so it could then cause stock outs. You have a stock out cycle that occurs, and your limits get smaller, and then you send more in, then your limits get smaller because you have less and less room to send in inventory. So overstocking and understocking issues are kind of married now.
That's so interesting, to hear your perspective on the inside of certainly what's happening with the recent inventory changes. My perspective, it sounds like calamity. I'm sure it feels like calamity for a lot of sellers to have to go, oh my gosh, the stuff that I parked, like now I've really got to rethink how I approach this inventory. And then the second bit, when you're talking about Amazon not being smart enough to really understand like when you're out of stock, gracious, that's got to be so frustrating, I'm sure, as a seller. As great as it is, I'm sure, as to sell on Amazon, you must have so many moments where it's like you guys still can't keep up with, the demand or the needs of the sellers, right?
Yeah, I mean, Amazon, they have their own sets of problems, but it becomes a lot easier to understand why they're doing the things that they're doing when you can really understand Amazon as a business, and knowing that one of the reasons that Amazon is doing what it's doing is because it's really maxed out. We're seeing these huge check-in times. Your inventory arrives and then it's not available for sale until 3-4 weeks later. They're trying to solve that with these new restrictions. It's a really cold turkey way for them to do it. They usually announce it and they give you a runway, but this time they announced it and they were like, today this is happening.
Wow.
That was kind of a shock to the system. But yeah, to understand why Amazon is making the changes that it's making really helps you to understand why they're making their policies that they're making. Understanding what's in it for Amazon and why would they be making that decision.
Yeah, it makes sense. But gosh, yeah, I mean, to do it the sort of the day of and give you no runway when we're talking like physical products, right? It's not like with their, I don't know how much runway they give for like commission updates if you're an Amazon affiliate, but like,
Brexit, we had all this foresight with Brexit. We had just various different things because we have to make changes. We had this different type of inventory change and we had prior knowledge and we were actually able to go into the API and find specific data to update our system. Now we're working backwards where the change was made and we're trying to catch up to it.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, gosh, you probably have different advice at normal times for this question, but it's worth getting into anyway in light of everything you've been talking about. It might feel a bit obvious, but how do sellers keep from stocking out, overstocking? I mean, is there a solution here? What can you do if you're a normal Amazon seller just trying to get by?
Yeah. So in terms of stocking out, it would be a good idea to have a third-party warehouse and to have the ability to fulfill on your own. So there's FBA and then there's something called FBM, which is fulfilled by merchant. So you have fulfilled by Amazon and you have fulfilled by merchant. The reason that fulfilled by merchant is a good option is because the sales come through Amazon. And so Amazon counts those as sales toward their algorithm. So even though we said Amazon can, when you stock out, Amazon can't really tell. Well, they consider if you're still making sales and fulfilling, even outside of Amazon, they're still counting that. So you're still going to take on sales. You're not going to tank your restock limits. So that's a good option to say, you set up a fulfillment center, even if you don't think you're going to use it. A really bad idea is to give Amazon all of your stuff and not have kind of an out. One of the things that we've done is we're sending inventory over on a boat, but for one of our products, it's cutting it so close that we actually have our supplier holding on to a month and a half worth of inventory just in case we have to airship it over. Because even though that's more expensive, it will be less costly to us than running out of stock. So if we have delays in the port, if we have delays at Amazon check-in, we still have that option to air freight something in before we stock out. So those are a couple of things. Is one, never let Amazon have all of your stuff. Never let anyone have all of your stuff. Never put it all on a boat at the same time. Never send it all to Amazon at the same time. And then always have a backup fulfillment center.
Excellent advice. Excellent. Well, I'm excited to ask you this question, and I'm not sure if you've got any data on this, but, have you worked with anybody and helped them get their inventory straight and they've been able to realize, an exponential increase in sales revenue? Was there anyone that was really able to basically transform their business when they got this inventory process right?
Yeah, and you don't hear everything, but you hear things now and then, and, people mention it sometimes in passing, and you're like, wait, what? Tell me, tell me, what was that again? And so we had someone who went from, they used to do a lot of air shipping because just not being prepared, just not being organized enough to do sea freight, there was a lot of air shipping going on. And the air shipping was costing $1.20 per unit. And then when they came into SoStocked and they got things organized and they got their processes in place, it went to about 45 to 55 cents per unit. So that was a huge shift. And when you did the math over an entire year, it ended up being a shipping savings of $150,000.
Wow. Yeah, that's insane.
It's huge. And then when you think that you're going to sell a business like that, if you get, say, a 3x multiple, it's $450,000 that you could be making or the buyer could be pocketing. So, that's one of the first things that a buyer looks at is how many times they stocked out. And if we could tighten up those systems, that's just pure equity right off the top.
Actually, can I quickly add on top of that? I'll let Brandon kick in on the buyer's front. But when you're mentioning basically this is helping a future valuation for an exit, are you working with a lot of your clients who are getting their inventory straight so they can prepare for a better, more profitable exit down the road?
We do have some. We have some of these guys that they do it and then, they'll call us up and they'll say that they're transferring ownership of the account or, they're done with the account and, sometimes they might put us in touch with the new owners. So we had that before. And then we've also had, say, brokers or aggregators who are using the system because, they'll purchase it and then they'll kind of take a look at what needs to be fixed. And one of the first things that need to be fixed in newly acquired business is the inventory.
Yeah, the inventory is the key role to making sure that the business is profitable. And as we're recording this call, we're actually in the second day of Amazon Prime Day. So I'm sure as long as all of those FBA sellers out there had taken your advice or maybe knew some of what you have mentioned already in this call, they should be doing quite well right now. But for our buyers, let's go ahead and shift over since Sarah had mentioned this before. So I'd like to get into a little bit more on the buyer's side. So how can buyers look at inventory issues as an opportunity for growth when they're looking to acquire a business? What do you feel is maybe some of the potential that's waiting for them if, say, a business or an asset has maybe some stock issues? Yeah, what are some of the easy wins for them, I guess you could say, in acquiring that business?
Sure. I said the first thing, an analysis on stockouts and storage fees. On both sides of those, there can be money. And this is directly based on, conversations that I have had with people who have acquired brands and shared various different kind of stories. One seller who had overstocked significantly, 6 months worth of stock for some reason or another. And I believe the fees ended up being $15,000 worth of fees, with a 3x multiple. that's a significant amount of savings. So I would say the first thing that you look at is, how much overstock, and how much leaner could we potentially run with that, avoiding those fees. And then on the inventory side, how much loss is there from stocking out? And those two things, right off the bat would be quick wins. And then the other thing that most people overlook is how you're packaging your product. What are your units per carton? If you're doing a lot of shipping and you're dealing with a lot of per carton fees, for example, you've got people who have to label each carton at the prep center or at the fulfillment center, how many units are in each carton? Because say you've got 25 units and you could push it to 50. That's immediate savings right there simply by changing how you package things. So that's something that I'm advising people who are having to do a lot more warehousing now that Amazon has these restrictions.
Yeah, it's important to look at all of the hands that are in the pie, I guess you could call it, making sure that everything is optimized on that side as well, too. Understanding where your expenses are going and where you can really, as you had mentioned, lean on cost to ultimately benefit in the long run. You've been working with stock now in the Amazon ecosystem for many years, even prior to the pandemic as well, Chelsea. So I'm curious, what is your take or maybe your insight to the future of Amazon and what it holds as far as logistics are concerned, or what inventory future things that sellers can do to better prepare themselves to avoid some of these common issues that we've discussed?
Yeah, I do think that Amazon is not going to reverse, these policies. Some people were hoping. I think they'll ebb and flow. They'll get better after things like Prime Day and, the holiday season. They'll get worse coming towards that. But I think that everyone has to be prepared to start thinking more intelligently about logistics, leveraging their suppliers when their suppliers will hold inventory for them and will only charge them for the inventory that is shipped. So there are things you can do to help mitigate some of those costs by, leaning on your suppliers if you have a good relationship. So I think that is part of it. And then the other part is that I think most people are going to have to start getting into using 3PLs, and the marketers are going to have to take responsibility for the entire catalog. And really all of that requires putting systems in place to have reporting that goes to the inventory managers, reporting that goes to the marketers, and weekly or monthly meetings. So the teams are going to really have to work together to be able to be on top of all of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really, really solid advice. And it's making sure that, your marketing side and I guess in the instance for e-commerce, the inventory side are working in tandem together. And as you had mentioned, an ebb and flow that's constant between the team. And something that we also do here at Empire Flippers as well. We have what we call our marketing meetings where sales and marketing get together and make sure everyone's on the same page. And that really is something that we don't hear often, I guess, when it comes to e-commerce businesses, where you might have a solopreneur that's running the business and they don't really think about it in that way where, they're just trying to get as much traffic to the listings as possible or as much sales out of the business as possible, but they don't really think about the lower SKUs and marketing those ones that are not selling so great. So yeah, really amazing advice, that you'd mentioned here, Chelsea. So that pretty much wraps up this episode as far as the bulk of our questions. Usually we like to wrap these things up with our interviewees on a few rapid fire questions. So I'll go ahead and kick off the first one here. So what do you feel is the secret sauce to getting inventory management right?
I think the secret sauce really is processes. I mean, you would first say data. I think data is given, but it's processes and having those processes in place and keeping them in place, because inventory management is a constant thing. And so part of that process includes having your data right, analyzing your data, knowing what to look for, and then including the marketing side of that data as well as even the cash flow side.
Awesome. Next question. What tools or resources can help aspiring FBA sellers?
I think that you would need a really good software suite. There's a lot of, good software suites out there. And there's other tools. One of my favorite tools is called Airtable. It's actually how I tried to create my inventory management before I realized that I needed to plug in the API and all of that. But it's a very helpful tool. Airtable, it's free and they have a paid version, of course, but it's basically I like to refer to it as a spreadsheet on steroids. It has filters, it sorts, it groups. And so, a lot of what sellers need to do is look at and analyze data. And so this is something that can help you to better analyze your data moving forward. And then I would say the last thing is to find a really good group that you can trust. Networking is so important. Networking is how I met my business partner. And it's really important not to do it alone, to crowdsource information and to learn from people who have been there before. And it really can save you a lot of time and money.
Great. Final question. What has been your funniest moment working as a digital entrepreneur?
Yeah, I had to think about that. I probably would say that it was getting our first sale because we were not thinking it was going to happen. One of these things, you put the product up there and you're like, I hope this works. And, if I can get a sale, then I know that it's real. And so we put our listing up. And at this point, there was a specific thing you would put it up for sale as fulfilled by merchant so that you could get reviews. You can't do the specific tactic anymore, but we had said that it was live and available when it was actually on a plane flying into the United States, and someone bought it. This product that we didn't have yet, someone bought it. And I looked at it, I'm like, oh my God. And I looked at my phone because we have this app on our phone that tells us if we made a sale. And I was practically dropping my phone. I was so excited, but also nervous because I didn't have anything for them. Trying to text my husband. And really cool story though, because we wanted to sell it before we went to our first, big convention, our big event. We wanted to make our first sale, and then it was going to be impossible because the inventory wasn't going to arrive. But, as luck would have it, and, these things that you wish for and the ways that they come true, it was true that we made our first sale officially, even though we didn't have anything in stock. We made our first sale before we got to that event.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I'm glad that worked out for you. You were able to, say fulfill that order and in orders to come. Obviously, you've learned a lot about inventory along the way. So it's been great to have you on and to learn a bit more. I mean, these are some really interesting things happening in Amazon. And I think these are shared pain points. And obviously, sometimes they're points of joy, because as you pointed out, this is a place that you can make a lot of extra money if you can just get that inventory right. So it's definitely worth figuring out and getting it to the point where it's not a detractor, but a way for your business to make money.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's really great to be able to help people with these types of things just because, the more that people understand it, the more that they're going to be able to really maximize their profit, which helps them to scale their business.
100%. Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming on. It's so great to hear from you, and looking forward to seeing how things play out for So Stocked. And thanks for offering a service that really probably saves a lot of FBA sellers from a lot of heartache.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me on. It was great to talk.
Yeah. Thanks again. Hey everyone, now that we wrapped up this episode and learned about the power of community in online businesses, we wanted to cover a common question about buying and selling online businesses in the content space. So first, the question is, should I find a business partner for my online business? So this is a really great question, and it's something that we do get asked quite often in whether you should partner with someone or maybe find a way to raise capital if you're looking to launch new products or whatever the case may be. A lot of people try to take the approach in maybe utilizing resources or maybe even a business partner in general to scale the business further. And there are a few pros and cons to adding in a business partner to your asset. So one of the pros, or a few of the pros, are with having a business partner is that you can share the work and the investments. So not having all of your eggs in one basket or having to take care of the operations of the business all on your own is a really great benefit to having a business partner, as they can help spread the workload and maybe even help you outsource a few tasks or some of the operations within your business model. Another great pro to having a business partner is it also helps you in scaling. So scaling the business even further, having someone else that you can rely on to help you grow the business is another great benefit. And then also you can leverage their skill sets in maybe something that you might not be as familiar with. So say they happen to be really good on the back end of the website and you're more of a front end developer. That can be a great asset to have, utilizing their knowledge in a particular area that you might not be as familiar with. Now, with everything that it has a great benefit, there are a few cons as well. So with partnerships in particular, it can be stressful to find the right right partner in particular. So sometimes you might not coagulate just correctly with them, or maybe there's some confrontation you might have with the business partner. Maybe they're wanting to take that business in one direction that you see is not really an opportunity in your eyes. So there might be a few issues that come up as far as that's concerned. So it's something you should definitely take into consideration. Also, making sure that your goals and the business goals in general and the vision for the business are aligned is also going to be a little bit of a challenge once you do bring in a partner to the business, or say you do happen to bring someone in that might have a different mindset than what you have on where the business should be going.
All right, everyone. That wraps up this week's episode of the Opportunity Podcast. We hope you've gained some valuable insight on the opportunities that digital acquisitions offer. Click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace to learn more about listings currently live on our platform. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a review and subscribe to this podcast for more great content that will be released very soon. Thanks again for tuning into the Opportunity Podcast, and we're looking forward to having you back next week and hear from your fellow entrepreneurs and online experts.